It wasn't just cheap labor. It wasn't just currency manipulation. It wasn't even corporate espionage. It was a fundamental shift in the center of gravity, a structural transfer of industrial capacity, from the debtor to the creditor, from the consumer to the producer. The pattern is unmistakable. History shows us exactly how this happens. It is not a random event. It is a cycle. Dominant powers do not simply lose their status by accident. They relinquish it through a specific sequence of economic choices. We will look at 3 specific historical precedents. We will map the arithmetic, and we will see where the trajectory leads. Consider the Spanish Empire in the 16th century, under Philip II. Spain was the master of the world. They controlled the seas. They controlled the Americas. They had access to a seemingly infinite supply of silver from the Potosi mines. This was their peak dominance. But the costs of empire were staggering. Maintaining the armada and fighting wars in the Netherlands drained the treasury. Instead of producing goods, Spain relied on the monetary shortcut. They imported everything. They used their silver to buy finished goods from England, France, and the Netherlands. The result was the price revolution. Inflation tore through the Spanish economy. A Castilian wool merchant in 1590 found he could no longer sell his goods abroad. His costs were too high. The middle class was priced out of existence. Spain had the money, but their rivals had the industry. When the silver flow slowed, the hollow shell collapsed, just like the Spanish Empire. The British Empire followed the same trajectory 3 centuries later. By 1914, London was the financial center of the globe. Sterling was as good as gold. But two world wars shattered the national balance sheet. The imperial cost became unsustainable. To maintain the illusion of power, Britain relied on debt and currency devaluation. They sacrificed their industrial competitiveness to protect the financial sector. By the late 1960s, the outcome was inevitable. A dock worker in Liverpool saw his wages rise in nominal terms, but his purchasing power vanished. The United States, the rising industrial power, had absorbed Britain's manufacturing base. The pound was devalued in 1967. The empire retreated. The torch had been passed to the producer. Just like the British Empire, the Roman Empire faced the arithmetic of decline in the 3rd century. Under the Severan dynasty and later Diocletian, the pattern held. Rome ceased to expand. The plunder stopped, but the military costs did not. The state chose the monetary shortcut. They debased the denarius. The silver content dropped from nearly 100% to less than 5%. Inflation exploded. The complex trade networks disintegrated. A legionary station on the Rhine demanded higher pay to afford bread. Forcing further debasement, wealth fled the cities. The productive class moved to fortified estates in the countryside, engaging in barter. The complex economy reverted to a primitive state. The center could not hold. Stage 1 is sound money and efficient industry. Stage 2 is the expansion of public works and imperial reach. Stage 3 is the onset of massive debt. To fund this expansion, Stage 4 is the beginning of currency debasement to service the debt. Stage 5 is rising consumer price inflation and the hollowing out of domestic production. Stage 6 is the flight of capital into hard assets and the fracture of social cohesion. Stage 7 is the reset, just like Rome. The current dynamic between the United States and China follows the script with mechanical precision. The United States, enjoying the exorbitant privilege of the world reserve currency, entered Stage 3, and for decades ago, the incentive was to export low-margin manufacturing to China to keep consumer prices down. While financializing the domestic economy, this was the monetary shortcut. China, acting as the rising producer, accepted the paper currency and used it to build the most comprehensive industrial base in human history. Current data suggests the transition is already in the advanced phases, while the United States focused on the financial economy, stocks, bonds, and derivatives. China focused on the physical economy, steel, rare earths, shipping, and infrastructure. The arithmetic is merciless. You cannot print industrial capacity. You cannot print supply chains. When the supply of goods is controlled by the creditor, and the demand is generated by the debtor printing money, the leverage lies entirely with the producer. Some economic historians note that the US dollar remains the dominant medium of exchange, arguing this provides a permanent moat against decline. However, the incentive for the rest of the world is changing when the dominant power weaponizes its financial rails or debases its currency to fund domestic deficits. The rational move for trading partners is to seek alternatives. We see this in the rapid accumulation of gold by central banks in the East. They are exchanging paper promises for physical collateral. They are positioning for the end of the cycle. The endgame arrives in one of three ways. The first is controlled decline. This is the British model after 1945. The empire accepts its reduced status, restructures its debts, and lowers the standard of living for its population over a generation. It is a slow, grinding loss of purchasing power, but the institutions survive. The second possibility is chaotic collapse. This is the Weimar Germany scenario of 1923 or the Roman crisis of the 3rd century. Confidence evaporates overnight. The currency is rejected by vendors. Supply chains break. The social contract dissolves as the population realizes their savings are worthless. This usually leads to authoritarian measures to restore order. The third outcome is a reset and restructure. This mirrors the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944. The global powers convene to establish a new monetary standard, likely backed by a basket of commodities or a new reserve asset, to restore trust in trade settlement. In this scenario, the nation with the largest gold reserves and the strongest industrial base dictates the terms. The only variable is timing and pain. Subscribe to the channel. Study history, not just headlines. Build resilience in your skills and your assets. The cycle does not care if you agree with it. It only cares if you are prepared.